from years ago, or if it's really morphing along with all video consumption. So in our first panel, looking at video strategically, we take up this question of, is it just video everywhere, and does video really change in its shape and format as it moves across circumstances, and how do buyers and planners think strategically about it? Taking the lead, someone I think you all know, Joe Mandisi, who is our editor-in-chief here, has spent several decades covering TV media buying and planning, and across all media, from the pre-rolls to branded video all the way back to TV. He's worked at pretty much every major every major trade outlet over the last few decades, and now our editor-in-chief, Joe Mandisi.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for Jordan and everyone else for and Ann for the preamble, because it's a perfect setup for this conversation. And you know, before I introduce my panelists, I just want to give you my personal preamble, which is when I started covering media for Adweek, actually another publication that Ken Fadner helped found back in the early 80s, I was covering this medium called television. And you know, at that time, it was defined by these, you know, big 3 broadcast networks and a bunch of local TV stations. But during that period, these new entities came along. They were called cable television networks. They were distributed by satellite. There were some other versions of television that didn't really take off, like teletext and videotext, which ironically might be what we're talking about here in an indirect way today. But the important part for me as a journalist was I spent a lot of time covering the differences between these new forms of television and the established ones, the networks, because that's where the money was. And it took a long time for cable to get on base, to establish itself. The big turning point for the cable industry was in around 95 or 96 when a gigantic ad agency called Ted Bates no longer exists. It's part of some part of Publicis now. I don't know what you would call it, maybe Saatchi. They came up with an estimate and a recommendation that marketers should put 5% of their television budgets into this thing called cable. It was kind of like a Mary Meeker-ish analysis, which is that there was enough user consumption going on cable that you really needed to do it to, you know, to reach the consumer. I could go on and on and on, but I actually want to make this point and then go into the panel because I think we're going to discuss this point. My main point was all during this period, we're spending a lot of time talking about the differences between cable and broadcast, but if you saw any consumer research at the time, the consumer just cared about things called, you know, CBS or ESPN. They cared about the shows. They didn't really care that much about the distribution medium. They cared about the content and the advertising that was associated with it. And to some extent, I think I've been feeling that about online video. Do people really know that, and I have a feeling Ann talked about this, but she'll talk about it a little more. Do consumers really know the difference when they're consuming video online, on a handheld, on a TV screen? I mean, yes and no, I'm sure, but that's kind of my preamble for this discussion. So I want to introduce our panel. We already know who Ann is, and that was a fabulous setup. To my left and your right, we have Randy Kilgore. As Chief Revenue Officer of Tremor Video, he's responsible for managing Tremor's sales and inventory growth, expanding its relationships with advertisers and publishers, and overseeing the development of strategic initiatives. Before joining Tremor, he spent 16 years at Dow Jones & Company and was Senior Vice President of Advertising for such properties as Dow Jones Online, The Wall Street Journal Online, MarketWatch, Barron's, etc. He has also served on the boards of the Interactive Advertising Bureau and the Online Publishers Association, and recently was installed as the new chairman of the IAB, so he carries a lot of weight on this panel.
I was going to say.
I meant,
all right, I'll suck it in.
I meant weight in the media sense, you know, we got to hit the trail. We got to hit the trails up there later, okay? In his role as Executive Vice President and Managing Director, U.S. Portfolio Management for one of the interpublic agencies, Mike Rasek oversees all media planning activity across North America for Since joining in 2007, as Managing Director of Integrated Planning across Johnson & Johnson, he's also served as Managing Director of Digital Communications. He's worked on a variety of accounts, including Kohl's, U.S. Army, MasterCard, Chrysler, BMW, Johnson & Johnson, and Brown-Forman, to name a few. And then lastly, as VP, Vice President, Digital Strategist at Cara, John Wolf advises P&G brands on digital marketing. He began his career in digital marketing at American Express, where he helped develop and market an e-commerce site. He worked for an internet startup, Jungle Interactive, just before the crash. He was head of marketing for LogicWorks and was a digital strategist with Omnicom's Colangelo. And I'd kind of like to open up a little bit by banking off of where Ann was going with kind of that, consumer experience data and explaining the emotional connections that people have to these media, because I think it fits in well with my own, thesis here, which is, do consumers really think differently about this medium? Do we spend too much time parsing and breaking down? There's obvious business reasons why we do it, and there's some practical research and measurement issues. Sight, sound, and motion. So I'd like to open up, just kind of getting your reaction to what Ann was talking about, the emotional connection to video versus television, and then just generally get you to weigh in on where you stand on the overall thesis. Is it different, or is it just all video, i.e. television brought to online screens, mobile screens?
First of all, anybody who's going to sit up here later today, take a practice run on these chairs. There's no comfortable way to get situated here at all. So, is it all video? Yes, I think, because, I don't want to sound like a two-handed economist, but yes, because of all the research we just saw and what we all in this room know, right? It's powerful, it's sight, sound, and motion, and it affects people's thoughts around brands, which is what improves the likelihood that they'll make a purchase or think more highly of a brand, and their stock price will go up, all the important things. So yeah, it's all video, and technology is improving to the, every moment to make it easier to be all video as well. So you sort of asked two parts of a question. The other was
perspective, but it's actually what consumers expect there, right? So to me, it's less about overthinking. There is a ton of overthinking on the creative end and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And to me, it's just simple. It's what's the expectation of a consumer on a mobile device versus if they're watching a pre-roll on Hulu. It's totally different, right? So you have to be able to adapt the creative to that, right, to that experience, versus just thinking you need reams of creative that's got to go out there and you're going to be optimizing on the click and stuff like that, right? And then on the back end, it's really about looking at metrics, right? So if you're going to be comparing yourself to TV, and I'm going to go tell my client that it's all video, and we do this to some of our clients, right, like Chrysler and some of our bigger clients, where we'll look at pre-roll and we'll tell them it's all video. We're going to compare it on, like when we talk to our clients, it's kind of like the guarantee, right? Your CPM is going to be $5. It's not going to be 20 at the end of this, right? And you're going to get X amount of impressions running. Who cares, right? Most senior clients don't care about that. What they want to know is that you're measuring, and when I tell you you're going to get 20 million total people, right, against an audience, it's going to be 20 million total, and this is how we're measuring it. And on the back end, we're measuring it as apples to pears, right, not apples to watermelons, right? So, and that's the key thing for us when we're talking to our clients about video, and that's the only way from our agency side you can have any water with a senior client that you're comparing the two as, whatever you're comparing, if it's mobile, if it's something on an iPad, if it's something that's appearing on Hulu, to what you would be doing from a TV perspective.
By OCR, Mike was referring to Nielsen's online campaign ratings, which we'll be talking about later, but it's their attempt to create a ratings-like equivalent for online media. John?
Hey, Jordan, we do have a crisis here. But the crisis is in this room, not in the industry. I might be a little bit of an idealist, unwilling to acknowledge that the way you guys who have to actually sell video, or in your case have to deal with your clients, that you have to take something that is a wonderful change in human history, in that people are using video, but for the first probably sit. I look at this a little bit differently. So it's not all video for me. Again, it's that idea of what you were kind of referring to. How are our consumers leveraging this medium? And most importantly, where are they receptive? If you guys want to reach my brands, show me that we can leverage this medium in a way that shows that they're receptive. I don't care about GRPs and other kinds of metrics. What I care about is, are we achieving the overall results for our business clients? And that's sales. Or maybe it's something else, like we're launching a new product, so we want something specific such as awareness and those kinds of metrics. But for overall, these are the kind of metrics that I would generally ignore. It's going to be about, are we achieving the overall objectives? And my clients are educated enough to know, and they're educated by me, and if we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs. We need to educate them to think differently. And I tell them, what you care about is overall sales, then don't look at these process metrics. These process metrics are important. They serve a role, so don't get me wrong. They're important for people like us to know whether or not we're getting what we paid for, whether we're delivering on a campaign. We're holding our publishers accountable for the money that we're laying down. But the only thing we should be thinking about is if we're using a particular medium to achieve our overall business objectives. So if there's a crisis here, I hope that we can educate our clients to not think about TV, not think about video the way they've been taught for decades to think about TV, but rather that we have the opportunity to redefine how we have a relationship with our consumers to orchestrate experiences that drive brand building.
Okay, so I've been here at Tremor for almost, about 6.5 years right now. And if my head's not like flat from beating it up against the wall, it should be, right? Because I've been,
I can see you from the side.
It's
really.
a little flat, right? Because, I mean, that's what we all know that. And we it's like, it's different, you got to think about all the things you could do. And it's true. And we're like, let's try to change the sports analogy to a different one, right? We're like the kids at the table with the parents, how was school today? Really good, my class, I feel like, English is going well. And then you go back in the bedroom with your siblings and you go, man, I cut class, I was out smoking in the back. You talk. I mean, so there are, you have to have companies that do what we do and what others like us do, right? Which is aggregate, use technology and figure out how to do it. Because it does have to have scale, it has to be meaningful, and it has to be meaningful at an effective level, right? Which is what I was talking about as well. If you're not persuading people, in large numbers, or actually I think Jordan mentioned this, then nobody's going to have the time to be able to invest or to care. So that's just,
Right.
That's part of the process.
Okay, so the shorthand is become these things called GRPs, basically. If you can be measured as a GRP, you can get in a budget and it could be bought. Is that where we're at now?
Mike will probably have a good perspective on this. I have a lot of conversations, and they're not all the same, and not everybody's in the same place, but it's moved significantly in the last 6 months, and certainly over the span of 6.5 years, to where that's a major part of the conversation, and people are considering, who have never thought about moving that kind of money before, are considering doing it now.
And I think to get easily purchased, you do need that currency. You do need the thought about GRPs. But I also see that marketers do need to think more about the brand building elements of it to truly get it into the mix. If they're not thinking about the fact that it can drive sales, to your point, and that it can build brands in the longer term, and that I can tap into different emotional mindsets and think about using video differently across the platforms, then it will get into the mix.
Okay, so before we move on, and I want Mike's point of view on this, on how we're managing and organizing big media budgets around this, I want to follow up with John. So what you're really saying is that, in Kara's point of view as a communications planning agency, you're looking at video as a format and how you can reach consumers on behalf of brands. And that includes YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And talk a little bit about that, and talk specifically about how budgets get allocated within your organization versus purchase media, earned media, own media, distributed media, content marketing, because I think that would be very helpful.
So I do have to acknowledge that we do buy a lot of pre-roll video, and that's where a large bulk of our dollars go when it comes to video today. However, what we're hungry for is, what is the next emerging opportunity that allows us to buy and scale, but also in a mass customized way where we're really truly leveraging the capabilities of a medium to really address a consumer's path to purchase barriers. What we care about is not just throwing an interstitial banner interface, in this case she, because we reach primarily women. We don't want to just throw a banner in her face and say, hey, this is our Procter & Gamble brand, buy us because we've somehow interrupted your experience. And they know that if I can reach that mass audience, I'm going to move boxes and sales. So there is a need to take a step back first before we can get them to think the other way, which is, how do you truly turn this into a mass customizable but yet scalable platform?
Well, Mike,
Sorry, I was just going to say, in terms of the context of how she's consuming, that's also where you see the power of the web original content, because it's thinking about, it's realizing that she is in a different sort of mindset, that she is consuming media differently. And so how can I actually customize my advertising experience to that different setting?
Yes.
So Mike, UM's a pretty communication savvy agency too, and so not everything that you leverage in terms of online video is going to be in the purchase media camp. But can you talk a little bit about how you divide budgets and how much of that's coming from non-purchase media?
So, I mean, that's client by client, right? But I mean, it's always the rule of thumb. It's like 70-30, 80-20. And I mean, that's just the way it works out. I mean, when you're looking at GRPs, I mean, GRPs are just the table stakes to have that conversation. And you just got to be smart enough to realize, not just us when we talk to our clients, but when you guys are coming in to sell it to an agency, not all GRPs are equal, right? And if you're talking to a TV guy in some cases, which you will, that's buying total video, you're never going to convince him that long tail is going to equal prime time or long tail is going to equal what's on Hulu. So there is a lot of conversation around that when you're debating the value of what you're buying. And that's why, from our perspective, the measurement of what you're buying, how you measure what you buy is crucial, right? So even when we're measuring two different shows that are on prime time, we're not just measuring it from GRPs and ratings and that type of stuff. That, who cares, right? That stuff, whatever it is, right? We're measuring it on, we have our own metrics that we're trying to measure what's the value of that program, of that GRP, and what's the impact that it's going to have on our brand, regardless of what the metric is, right? Because we all start off with, the communications goal or the business goal we're trying to achieve is X, right? And it could be raise awareness by 2 points, move propensity around a message up by 3 points. And in some cases, you're going to find out that, hey, it's not The Walking Dead that's going to drive that for you. It's going to be something on AMC that's half the CPM, right? And as you're measuring that, you're shifting your budgets and optimizing against against that. So from our perspective, it's happening already in TV, right? That we're going to do that's going to be either custom from a creative standpoint, or it's going to be long tail that it's going to appear on properties that people have never heard of, right? It's going to, then that's when you get into the context of how it's going to appear and how you measure it. And it's either going to work or you optimize out of it after a week. I mean, it's just that simple, right? And that's part of the promise you have to a client, that when we're talking it's all video, it's not just we're buying it as all video, we're measuring it as all video, and we're optimizing, on a bi-weekly, monthly basis against the entire budget, not the online video budget, not the TV budget. It's one bucket of money that we will optimize to the client's business goals. So that way, when we're at the end of the quarter and we're reporting out, it's either we achieved it or we didn't, right? To them, it's irrelevant where the money ended up. Did it end up on Lost on it's a dead show, right? But whatever. Did it end up on American Idol, or did it end up on some long-tail program like Gilligan's Island on Hulu? They don't care. All they're going to want to care about is, I hit my sales goal, hey, my awareness levels are where they have to be, and the message awareness around the launch of a new product is exactly where I want to be. The retailers are giving me more shelf space. I mean, that's the end goal for these guys. Where the money gets shifted, that's what they hire us to do, right? So we have to just be diligent on it. And then from your side, when you're talking to us, that's the reality of the conversations that are happening. And I know that's tough, because when you come in and you're talking to junior guys, right, they're not talking to you guys about this stuff, but at the senior levels, that is the conversation. That is how, if you want to get on a plan, and I can just say this now, and if you want to talk to senior people in an agency, that's the conversation I will have, right? That's the conversation David Cohen will have at my agency. If you want to just come in and talk about GRPs or, how many impressions you can run for me, I got 400 people you can talk to, right? And go talk to them, because I'm not interested in that conversation. Because that, to me, is just figure out what the CPM is. I don't really care, right? So
can we agree? I'd love to have this debate for a whole panel, but we don't have enough time to go into it. So let's agree for the rest of this panel that we're not talking about web distributed video. There are great examples of that by agencies. We're talking about purchasable, buyable, paid video media. Is that okay? Go ahead.
Why?
All right, fair enough.
No, let me.
No.
I'll make one point, and then we'll put ourselves in that discussion, because we do need to focus. placing ads around that, because that's what we mean by buying video. But I'm looking at it also that there's another emerging way, so that we're not just looking backwards, we're not just being susceptible to the next newest fad, but rather we're looking forwards in a way that we're saying we're going to design how marketing is going to be moving forward, and we're going to educate our clients in that way so they start to think about this and then eventually start to put the dollars there as well.
I think you're right. It's just another panel discussion. Cara, Digitas through the New Fronts created that wonderful Real Women of Philadelphia. I think that did emigrate eventually to television's big screen. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. So if we could just focus on the buyable portion of online video, the part that is analogous to TV. And if you don't mind, let's jump into GRPs. Because now that we have a common denominator of sorts, well, let's talk about that in a minute. But let's assume we have a common denominator, a singular product of GRPs. Let's call it Nielsen's online campaign ratings for the minute. What does that mean? How does it transform the way the supply chain, the way agencies plan and buy online video, and the way you sell online video? Is it just another day part for television now? Do you look at it that way now? Is it just another way to reach viewers in front of a screen?
Well, from the sales side, I don't think it's just another one. I mean, there's not one answer again, unfortunately, but it's a significant moment in time where, because, and Lynn's going to hate us if we keep talking about Nielsen all the time, but if you can, as long as what has happened is that there is a standard metric that is accepted, and in some cases it is VCE, it is ComScores, but traditional marketers have bought TV using Nielsen, so there's I think a bias there, a natural bias. Marketplace tensions are good, but it's but it is that's what's changed, right? Is that has become accepted, that the methodology is accepted, and therefore the marketers understand it. So
that's just the check the box metric. I would hope that's what you sold us on. I would hope you could deliver that, right? And then you go off now and you have to get measured on top of that against performance, right? And it's not the performance now shifting. It's not about clicks, right, and view throughs and viewable impressions and all that type of stuff. That's all table stakes, right? It's really about how you're impacting the brand. So I think from a publishing perspective, it's just gotten a lot harder, and from an agency perspective, there's just a lot of education that has to happen from top down through organizations to make the rank and file understand what that means, right? Because to Randy's point, what do you do when that happens, right? Because that doesn't happen in TV, right? I mean, it just doesn't, right? So you go in, you guarantee, they tell you this is the guaranteed demo. You're getting that guaranteed demo come hell or high water, right? Where on online video, you're watching it happen, right? So from our perspective, it doesn't matter who we're using for that metric. We're pretty open about it. We give you access to it. You can watch it while it's happening and optimize in real time against that to get to the audience number. But in some cases, you're just not going to be able to do it for whatever reason. I mean, to Randy's point, like the example he used makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Right? And it's not something you're going to solve in the cadence of a media buy. So, I mean, it's not perfect, right? And I think it's just incumbent on everyone going in not to position any of that stuff as the holy grail, right? That it's empirical and that's just the way it is, because that's when all we're going to be doing then is just putting a wall between us and and the publishing side, where you're just basically fighting over make goods and stuff like that, right? When you look at the relationships between TV buyers and the publishers on that side, it's a fairly good relationship, right? You're always going to have your toxic moments here and there, just like any relationship, but the relationship's fairly tight, and they're all working to the common goal, which is deliver for our clients, right? Where we have to, in order for us to succeed on the GRP metric, we have to do the same thing on the digital side, right? So when you're talking total video, you have to talk it like that, where you have to have that relationship where when something like that comes up, you're working out what the solution is. It's not just like, F you, give me my make good or I'm not paying you, right? And some of that stuff is happening when you look in the industry and stuff, and to me, it's counterproductive, right? And then we tell our clients, we're pretty open with our clients on that when we talk about the measurement. It's not perfect, right? But perfect's the enemy of good, right? So at this point right now, it's something to use. We use it, right? We're measuring against it, and you just have to track the anomalies and chalk up the anomalies that maybe it's an anomaly, and then you look at the back-end results, and the back-end results are bearing out that that's actually moving the needle anyway. So
just really quickly to add to that, it's a different conversation that you guys are having with your clients than we're having with ours. we're not talking about GRPs really. We are talking, but I have to ask you guys this. Does it really change what we do and how we go to market for our clients? Does it change our buying patterns of behavior? Or is GRPs just a language thing that helps them understand and gives them the confidence to make those dollar switches? We have the same challenges of trying to get our clients to stop thinking about TV first and start seeing the overall picture of holistic communications and what's possible, and that there's these other things that are just as wonderful in driving sales. But we leverage, I think, the opportunity to do that through test and learns that show proven results. So you can show that online video works in other ways than the GRP conversation, but otherwise I see it as a Trojan horse where it's, we're sneaking in there to do the right thing, but perhaps in the wrong way. And I guess as a purist, that's the part that bothers me. I wish we were having a different conversation with our clients. I wish we were talking to them about what the promise of online video can be or what it could be, as opposed to trying to convince them that it's like TV when it isn't.
Sorry, if I could just build off of that. I think, to your point, the GRP is almost the necessary evil to get people speaking the same language and to consider it as part of their buying process. But I do believe it's a bit of a step back. We've always talked about online being the most measurable media. You want to be able to prove the ROI. You want to be able to prove whether or not something's had a brand impact or sell something. Boy, you can do that in online and with video specifically better than any other media. So we need to think about how to use different measurement systems to really prove ROI versus those that are being used to create confidence in buying.
Yeah, it's just shorthand for doing business. If you think that's bad, wait until Nielsen rolls out their cross-platform ratings. So the most significant frame I saw today was the one you put up there on the YouTube reach versus TV reach and the efficiency factor, which was amazing. I mean, on the downside, you know, online video only reaches 13% on average and TV reaches 75%. But the significant part was the under-delivery. And that was the thing that put cable on base in the 80s at agencies. Wasn't the reach factor. It was the fact that the light viewers, the only way you could really get them was through this new medium. And the same thing's going on here with video. Is that your ace in the hole?
Yeah, I mean, that, and I've heard, and you know, this is just what I've heard, that some of the networks won't even guarantee, broadcast networks won't guarantee 18 to 34 anymore.
Wow.
So that takes it from, yes, the light TV viewer, the incremental reach, and adds in the, you know, the notion that we all believe is shifting audiences, you know, eyeballs, money follows eyeballs, and changes a major, you know, there's a lot of people trying to reach, you know, adults, men or women, 18 to 34. So if that's true, and we know where they are, obviously, and we're able to guarantee that demo, then that will make a huge impact.
So John, regardless of how you're deploying video, does that shift money, that factor?
Absolutely. So believe it or not, my clients have only been in the digital space now for under 5 years.
Wow.
Because TV works so well for them. And it was a struggle prior to my time to joining my current agency. Someone else fought that battle and convinced them that they needed to start testing and learning and actually investing in this digital world. And one of the key bases for being able to do so was being able to say, hey, we have an opportunity to expand your reach incremental audiences, because there's a bunch of people, light TV viewers, that we're not reaching now, but they're within our demo, and they're the right segments for who we want to sell our products to. So that was our initial test and learn in video, and we still, to this day, within Procter & Gamble, my clients have the two of the brands I work on have the highest ROIs in the company. We get a tremendous return. And our research shows it's probably because we're actually reaching an incremental audience rather than just duplicating.
So all of the elements are in place now to shift massive amount of money from television into online. I think the one thing that's missing, and this is my editorial opinion, is the emotional factor, and not for the user, but for the industry. And the time when I saw money shift from broadcast to cable wasn't because of reach and GRPs. It was because somebody came along with programming that excited people, and it was like ESPN and MTV, and there was nowhere you could reach that kind of content and that audience except on cable. And we haven't had that happen with online video yet, for the most part. When is it going to happen? What does it take?
I think that's a tremendous point. So when we go to market with our clients, we ladder it back to business objectives. And in this particular case, we were able to look at the numbers and we were able to tell them, look, 90% of our digital marketing spend is against basic reach. So we're trying to reach people and we're hitting against that awareness barrier, and that's fantastic. But where we're really failing is driving emotional point of differentiation. So we really need to change our marketing in a way that we're as effective using online channels and driving that emotional connection, because when you're premium brand and you're fighting against private label, you have to overcome the fact that you're premiumly priced. So you just hit on a major point for us in our conversations today, in that we want to use this as an opportunity not just to drive sales, but it's really also about doing so in a way you're driving that emotional connection. And I think that that's part of the conversation that really sells it, when they recognize that it's not emotion for emotion's sake, it's emotion because that helps you drive sales, that helps you protect against private label, and that helps you beat your competitors.
And I think what you're talking about is something disruptive needs to happen. Right now, we're dealing with this horrible thing called momentum. I've always done it that way, so why shouldn't I continue to do it that way? I know how to measure it, I know how it works, I know how to buy it. But what that new cable content provided you was with something different, something disruptive in the marketplace. And I think we're still sort of looking for that in terms of online video.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so we're asking ourselves, it happened on TV first, right? Which is I Love Lucy, right? So the question is always like, when's our I Love Lucy moment, right? And the new fronts have, I think that was part of the intrigue last year with that spark and I Love Lucy moment for original web content. I don't think it really happened. And it may not ever happen, but what is probably happening, or what is happening, is people are saying, I'm watching my show, and they're not watching it on TV. Right. And so it may not be the same. We may be using an old paradigm to try to understand what is happening around us, but what's happening around us is just that. So I'm watching Breaking Bad, leave me alone, I'm watching my show, and they're watching it on their phone. And that's what is really probably going to be the change that happens while we're looking for the other change, or has happened.
So, Mike and John, and I know I said we weren't going there, but is that one of the reasons why agencies and brands are creating their own content, because they don't find it available from the professional distributors? No?
Not really. I mean, you can find some of it, but at the end of the day, it depends on your client and what the objectives are to the client. When you start stacking up the different objectives by different brands, like for someone like J&J, 65 brands, you're never going to find one, perfect publisher that can produce all the content you need. So you have to go out and you're going to produce, you're going to brief them, just like, it's almost like you're producing pilots. You're going to brief them, you're going to go out, you're going to produce content. And you made a great point before that it's not to drive sales, it's to drive the emotional connection to get to the sale, right? Because that's what every brand does and used TV for years to do, right? So it's all about tugging on the heartstrings to get people to pay attention to your brand, realize what the brand means to you personally, make you care about the brand so you don't shift. That's how you get brand loyalists. So from a digital content perspective, you have to do that. You're not going to, if you're just waiting for other people to produce the content for you, you're probably going to get a couple of pieces of content a year. You got to go out, you got to produce it. It's expensive, right? It's not easy to do, right? It's not, and that's the part that from a client perspective that they get more frustrated with than anything to do with proving that it works. They know it works, right? We've been testing it for 10 years, right? So it's just a matter of they know that's a huge time commitment, right? It's super expensive, and the distribution on it is something that they have to take on, right? Which is, for some people, scary, right? Other brands, all in, let's just keep moving along. Other brands will significantly worry about, we're going to produce something great and 5 people are going to see it, right? So how do we get the scale to it, right? And how do we get the consistency behind the scale that we're getting that
that specific challenge of having to create content by asking our publishers to do it for us and using our media dollars as the way that we're paying them, because they're experts in who their audiences are. They're experts in creating content to begin with that compels that user engagement. So why not ask them to do what they do best, but just do it in a way where the content itself intersects with what our brand equities are and where our thematic points that we want to hit are, and just create content for your audiences, but just create content within that slightly more narrow circle of what our brand messaging needs to be. Whether it's brand integrated, it's at least thematic, and we drive that association by making sure our advertising surrounds that content, and we just started doing that last year, and I think that's a direction we're definitely going.
So here's the problem. Yesterday, a statistic came out. The fastest growing online video ever was the Harlem Shake, and it just surpassed Gangnam Style. In like 4 weeks, it attained 1 billion views, okay? And, you know, that's the world you're competing in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet, I heard that either the top or one of the highest ranked publishers of video content for women is Kraft. So they're creating their own content, or they're working with partners to be able to do it, but it's happening on their site. Not selling and advertising against it, but that's a marketer, you know, being really smart and creating content and doing it much more. You know, the Harlem Shake is you know, it's a red herring, right? It's like when we all first started talking about, man, look how many people are online. Then we were using email to measure, you know, total usage, right?
So we're not competing with the Harlem Shake, thank God. We would fall on our faces. But what we are trying to do is, for video, is we're making sure that we're reaching the right audience. And we feel like we can fly underneath the waves here. We're okay with that. As long as we're reaching our audience and as long as they're getting the content that actually drives the types of consideration we want to drive, that results in the emotional connection that we want to drive as well, then we're succeeding in the online video space. Thank God we're not competing with the Harlem Shake.
So we should take some questions if anybody has. There's a lot of millions of dollars up here. So,
hi, I'm Declan Carney. I'm the CEO of Blue Link Marketing. A question from Mike. You were talking about if I was trying to sell you some media, which I'd say would be a daunting task. But you said it. You know, CPM doesn't matter, GRP doesn't matter. In the end, it's what really matters is does it work for the client. And I would agree, absolutely. And you said it, whether it's a long tail website or it's some cable channel that delivers this and it's not the premium.